One of the greatest singer-songwriters of the past half-century is James Taylor. And look no further than this video to see how much of an influence he's been on me. But it's not just his singing and his songwriting that's so iconic, it's also his guitar playing. It's very unique, very recognizable. And I have actually taken a lot of the tools of his trade and incorporated it into my own playing. And that's what this video is about. I'd like to show you 6 tools, 6 techniques that he uses in his playing and how he uses them in his songs so that you can learn them and apply them to your songs. And in fact, we'll go a step further and I'll take 3 chord progressions at the end of demonstrating those techniques. I'll take 3 chord progressions, just simple chord progressions, and apply some of those tools and techniques to show you how I'd use them in my own playing. This is going to be good. So come on, let's go. All right, the first tool is the use of hammer-ons. You might have noticed that when James plays, if you've watched any of the videos of him playing live, for example, he prefers certain chord shapes over others, especially with major chords. For example, he prefers this D form, this A form, and this E form. This C form, which is very common, he doesn't really like very much. He'll use it on occasion, but I've heard an interview he said it's not interesting to him. And the reason why is because of this tool of hammer-ons and hammer-offs. So oftentimes when he's playing in C, he'll take a capo, move it up to the 3rd fret, and just play an A. And what he's doing is he's taking, for example, the D chord, and he's hammering on and hammering off. Hammer on is when you take a note, you pluck it, and then you hammer on the next note. And hammering off is when you take a note that's already fingered, and you hammer it off or pull it off. So he's surrounding this D, he's working and by the way, I'm going to speak in terms of as if this capo wasn't here. So I'll call this a D. It's really an F, but we'll call it a D. And so he's working around this open 2nd fret and 3rd fret, which would be an E, F sharp, and G if it was a D. And he's doing things like this. Going backwards. He makes combinations where he'll add maybe the 2nd string. Okay. Same thing with the A. Things like that. And a good example of this is in his song Something in the Way She Moves, which I think was the song that he played whenever he auditioned for the Beatles. It's a beautiful song, and what I want you to watch for is both the A and the D when I get there, and how the hammer-ons occur. So you saw the, and then the movement on the D as well. I'm going to do another line and do something different on the D from the E minor. That's a very common line he'll use as well. But hammer-ons and hammer-offs, an excellent tool. The second tool or technique I'd like to show you is movement of the bass line. And in this, he'll take chord changes like the song Carolina on My Mind, or Carolina in My Mind. And he'll take, say, a D, a B minor, a G, an E7, and an A, and connect them by moving the bass lines. So he could say, ain't it just like a friend of mine to hit me from behind, yes I'm, which is nice. But instead, he moves it. Ain't it just like a friend So he's just walking down the notes in the key of D, which is pretty cool. That really connects the line. And another thing that I've heard him do before is he'll move two lines at once, which is a little bit difficult technique-wise. But for example, he'll take this bass line part of it, and then these notes. Together they would sound like this. So I'm going to play that slow in the context of Carolina in my mind. Whoops. See, it's not easy. Try and play that quicker. So, movement of bass lines, and then another line in addition makes that even sweeter. Okay, a third technique is chord substitutions with creative voicings is what I'll call it, where he'll take a chord and he'll modify it by adding an extension, like maybe a seventh or a flatted seventh, and then he'll also oftentimes add open strings to make a very creative voicing. So a good example of this would be on You've Got a Friend, and I'm not sure, I think he plays it on the 3rd fret. But so the two chords would be E minor and B7 when you're just doing the verse, and it just alternates between those two. When you're down and trouble, so that's it. Need a helping hand. It just stays between those two chords, but that can get a little boring. So he makes it, I think, a minor 7, and then when he gets to the last minor 7, he adds this chord, plays the 6th string in the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings, and this is an E minor 9 without the 5th. If you played this note, it would be the 5th. So this sounds much better. Listen to this. So a chord substitution that opens it up, it's open notes as well. Another good example of when he would do that kind of a thing is the song Frozen Man. And this is, I think, ingenious. So he's switching between a B minor 7 and an E minor, or B minor and an E minor. For the intro. And then basically A and D. But that's kind of boring. So he does this. He takes a B minor, makes it a minor 7, and then here is the flatted 7, A. He actually takes it out and puts it here. And he doesn't even play it. So he takes this form where he just plays the 5th, 4th, 2nd, and 1st strings. It's still a B minor 7. And then for the E minor, he does the E minor 9 without the 5th. The cool thing is, because he's already playing this chord, he has that form already there, and all he has to do is hit the 6th string to add the E note. So he gets this instead. Remember, it sounded like this. Kind of stale. He makes it sound like this. Much better. And it's just a chord substitution with a very creative voicing. Awesome. Let me give you a third example. There's a couple songs he plays where he takes a D and he moves to a B minor. It's nice. But instead, what he does is he takes the F sharp on the D and he moves it to a B. Now, when James plays a D, by the way, you might notice he puts his first finger down here, his middle finger here, and his ring finger here. Because his first finger, he can do a lot of movement with it. I do it the conventional way and just move my middle finger, but you can do it however you like. So takes a D, moves this here. Now he's got a B minor 7 form. It's a little different. It adds like a fourth, so it's like a suspended 4 as well, like a B minor 7, no fifth / suspended 4, something like that. Call it whatever you like. And he gets that. So on the song Copperline, he does that. Isn't that a cool sound? Even the old folks who never knew why they call it like they do. Very cool. There's another song he plays called Song for You that he wrote. Does the same thing, but now just different picking. Very cool chord substitution with some open sound. Very creative. So a third technique is substitute chords, and if you can, add some open voicings, and I think that'll really spice up your playing. The fourth technique that he uses is he'll take chords and he'll slide them. Oh, let's move it here. He'll slide them to a different position, so that now he's playing an inversion of the chord that he really wants to play, and it creates a different sound. But because of the slide, he gets this really cool sound. So for example, the classic Fire and Rain is a wonderful example of that. The chords he's playing is A and E minor. Down, 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 then G, back to A. Okay, that's really the chords. But so what he does, he says, well, let's take an A up here, and I'll put it first on a G form, and I'll slide it up, playing the A bass. And he adds some nice picking as well. So he's playing this, but he's doing it like this. That's creative. And then he goes back down to this G form, so he can slide back down. But when you do that and you play an E bass, you actually have an E minor 7. And that's the chord he wants. So, and it sounds like this. The use of slides to change the inversion of the chord is a really cool technique. I'll give you another example. He wrote a song for his daughter called Sarah Maria, and he wants to, it's in E. So he wants to play this E, but instead he's going to take a D form and slide it up 2 frets, which makes it an E. And then he actually incorporates another inversion by taking this G sharp and moving it over here to the 4th string. So, really creative. And so he takes this, okay, it's really what he's doing to this. That's sweeter. And he's just taking this D, sliding it up, changing the inversion. There you go. And then transitioning. Very nice. The next technique I would call jazzing it up, or using jazz style chords, where he actually uses major 7ths or minor 7ths or minor 9s. He, instead of taking dominant 7ths, he'll play augmented 5ths. Sometimes he transitions with a diminished 7th chord. Just, he makes it sort of jazzy sounding. A good example is his song, If I Keep My Heart Out of Sight. So look at all the major 7ths and minor 7ths, and then he uses an augmented 5th in this as well. So pretty. Another example is the song Oh Susanna. It's a very classic folk song. A lot of people play it between C and G with picking. Well, I come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. This alternating bass, right? And I'm going to Louisiana, my true love for to see. That type of thing. What James did is he played major sevens and minor sevens. Banjo on my knee, down to Louisiana, my own true love for the sea. Okay, just kind of changing it up. Sounds really pretty. So change your chords sometimes from majors to major sevens, or minors to minor sevens, or minor nines, or major nines. Maybe use diminished seventh, like in Don't Let Me Be Lonely Tonight. Do me wrong, do me right. So he's playing a diminished seventh, takes the F sharp note, and makes it the bass. So that's another example of just kind of jazzing it up. All right, the final tool of his trade or technique that I'll show you today is his use of the add 9 chord, or you can call it an add 2, whatever you want to think of it. And that's where you take a chord, and let's just take D. And the root, or the one note, is a D, which is found here and found here in the chord D. So you do an add 9 chord, you take that root and you don't play it, you substitute the 2 note, which in D is E. So you would take this chord, move your finger, and I bar, like how I do it probably. You're playing the E here while you're keeping these 2 notes right here for the D, and you get this. Very beautiful chord. One example of how he uses that in his great song, Secret of Life. And so this is the first chord he plays. It is an A, add 9. Let me just play a little bit of it, and you can hear how beautiful it sounds. Beautiful stuff. Okay, so I'm going to take 3 chord progressions, nothing fancy, and try to add that James Taylor flavor to them and kind of spice them up. And you'll notice as I take them, each one will use his tools, but they'll get progressively farther away from sounding like James Taylor. And that's intentional, because I want to show you that you can use his tools and techniques, but make it your own. So the first one will sound like James. And let's say I took in the key of D, the 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 1 chord, and the 5 chord. So D, G, D, A. Well, because I have a D and an A, this is an excellent place to use the hammer-on techniques. Second example, I'm going to stay in the key of D, but this time I'm going to change the chords to an E minor, that's the 2 chord, an A, that's the 5 chord, a D, that is the 1 chord, and then a B minor, that is the 6 chord. So you've probably heard this before. Those changes before. So how can I spice them up using some of those tools or techniques? Well, the first thing I notice is because I have this E minor and I'm starting here, why not make it that E minor 9, that chord substitution where he plays these notes. Because I've got my two fingers already separated on the second and the fourth strings, I can slide down to an A7. In fact, keep moving between those if I want to. Something like that. I'm not sure, we'll see what happens. And then when I move to the D, of course I can hammer on, that'd be good. Or, what if I took the D and moved it between an A and a D, but just on the top 3 strings? Still playing the D root. And then maybe on the B minor 7 I can add an extension. I can add that 7th but put it here on the 5th fret. Or here's another form. Very odd, right? But it's a form of B minor. Maybe there. Let's just see how it turns out. Change it up at the very end. So you can see it sort of sounds like James Taylor right here. That kind of sounds like it, and even this. But as I got to playing it more, you could see it sort of started to get away from sounding like him. It sounded more like me, which is what you want. Make it your style. Okay, let's do one more. And here is, I'm going to take all the diatonic chords in the key of E, except for the 7th chord. So those would be E, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A, B, and C sharp minor. And I'll put them in an order. And this is what it would sound like. E, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A, back to G sharp minor, C sharp minor, F sharp minor, and B. Now you've probably heard a progression similar to that. What would be a good way to spice that up with techniques that James would use? So the first thing I see is I've got this E major. Why don't I make it an add 9 chord? So to do that on an E, remember, you take the root, and the root for an E is here. And instead of playing the root, I play the 2nd, or I go a full step higher. And now that is the 9, or the 2. The 2 or the 9, the 2nd or the 9. And you get this. Okay, very beautiful sound. Now the chord itself is kind of a reach, but if you practice it, you can get it. And I'm thinking about this, and I hear this B and this E. It's not, there's no fingers pressing on it, so they're just ringing out nice, open voicing, right? And so what if I kept those 2 notes open for every single chord? Sort of like a pedal tone, or pedal tones in this case. So when I'm playing this F sharp minor, let's change it to a minor 7, but I'm going to make it even easier by just playing the F sharp and then these 2 notes on the minor 7, and on the 5th string I'm just going to touch it with my thumb to mute it. I don't even want to play it. I'm just going to play these 3, but keep the B and the E open. So I took this chord and made it so I can keep that ringing of the B and the E. Let's hear how that sounds together. Okay, let's do the same thing by going up to the G sharp minor. And these are variations. So they're chord substitutions, and that's the technique I'm using. These are variations of an F sharp minor and a G sharp minor. And then I'll go to an A, just like this, but I want to keep this B and this E open, so I'll leave them off and just play the middle two strings. It's a beautiful chord. Go back to the G sharp minor. And now I'm on a C sharp minor, but I want to play these two open, and let's extend it to a minor seventh, make it jazzier. So I'm just going to play the fifth, fourth, and third strings, leaving these two open. Okay. Go back to the F sharp minor form. And now I'm down to the B. It's my last chord. And here I'm thinking, okay, why don't I make it sound more unique? So what I could do is do an A over B, which wants to resolve to a B9 or a B7. But I don't have these open strings, so let's do this instead. Instead of playing all those notes, why don't I just play these three, the fifth, fourth, and third strings, and keep these open. So this is more like an E suspended 4 at this point, but I'm playing it with a B / B bass. All right. So what was this? Which is nice. Becomes this. And this doesn't sound like James Taylor, but it sounds like me using his tools. Spice it up. Okay, just taking a chord progression, changing it up by adding some of the tools that James uses, but with my own flavor, my own style, and you make something pretty good into something a lot better. All right, so those are the tools and techniques that I've gleaned from studying James Taylor's music and applied to my own playing. I hope that you like this video and that you'll use those tools and those techniques in your own playing to add that James Taylor flavor and to spice up your own music. Good luck. Thanks for swinging by. Bye-bye.